Okay. So last time in the Clossi Approach video, in the Clossi Approach to 9x9 for 25 Qs, we talked about basically the starting out with liberties and starting to be able to read those, and how pushing our opponents to the edge is how we capture stuff. And we talked about cutting points on like the second line and the third line and pushing them down to the edge and what variations those were involved. So cutting points and liberties are the starting points of our attack and defense. And then blocking our territory and pushing our opponent's territory. That was what we talked about on the 9x9. The 13x13, we're going to do the exact same thing, but we're going to expand on it a little bit. Now, the biggest thing I think that is going to be confusing on the 13x13 is going to be the 3-3 invasion. So let's start with that, the most confusing thing first. So this is called this is a star point. This is the 4-4 point. To the 4-4 point, the 3-3 is very, very common. And it's especially common nowadays thanks to AlphaGo and the new AIs who like to play the 3-3 early in the game. So this 3-3 point can be considered as big as an open side, but it is less valuable than an open corner. Okay, so if we have 4 open corners, you have a couple options, which is approach, which we'll talk about more, or you can play a 3-3. This is also common. So I recommend learning different things and trying out several different things of the basics, but you have to know at least the basic variation of the 3-3. So these are going to be a little complicated, but they'll make more sense as you get stronger, but we can't really get away with not knowing them because they're so commonly played nowadays. So let's start with just what you do. Well, your opponent goes in your corner, so the first thing you do is you want to surround. Okay, and then they try to walk out, and then you can play a Hane. And we'll talk more about this at 15Q, where Hanes are used for attacking. But basically, you can play this even though it's a cutting point because you're surrounding your opponent in the corner. Okay, and then we play this Nobi to move forward. Our opponent plays. And then, for safety, I'm going to encourage you to play one more because now white is completely alive in the corner. We'll talk more about life and death as we get more into it and further into the series. But this shape is easy to live with if we know the basics of life and death. So this is the common variation that I want us to know. This is also called a Joseki. Joseki is a common variation in the corner. So this would be our very first Joseki. Okay, it's a little complex, but it's very simple. Black is just trying to seal white into the corner and the edge. White is trying to live at the edge by getting space to live. And black is getting influence on the outside. Okay? So this is probably the scariest thing that we're going to have to face. But as long as we know our basic variation, it's okay. There is another simple one, but it might be confusing. So if you can play this one, great. If you can't, it's okay. You can get away without playing it. But the more complex one is this one. And this one looks super complicated because it has all these cutting points, right? But it's actually quite simple. The response for white is to cut here and trap this stone along the edge. Remember our 9x9 basics where we cut one to attack another? This is kind of the same thing. We Atari this stone to attack that stone. Now, it looks bad for black because black just lost a stone on the edge. But we can actually just trade and play here and get these stones. So white gets one stone, black gets two. This is a good way to keep your corner if you really want your corner. Now, I want to explain that this is the simple stuff, but there is a lot more stuff that goes into it. There's a lot of variations here. But just learn these for now. Start with these. If you don't understand the double Hane one, it's okay. You don't have to play it. I think it's just important to remember white if your opponent plays a double Hane to you. It's to remember how to break out and survive on the edge. I think that's the only thing you have to remember. This is technically above the 23Q level, but because it's just so commonly played, we need some sort of response to it. Because if we don't have any responses, it can very easily backfire for us. So even though I don't really like these at this level, it is important that we know that they exist and what they're supposed to look like. Then we can sort of branch off from there. So because it's so common, we do have to learn this move. Now, some other shapes to learn. So we know our basic starting points are 3-3, 3-4s, and 4-4. Okay, so someone mentioned in chat, do corner enclosures apply at this level? And yes, they start applying on the 13x13. What is a corner enclosure? Well, a corner enclosure is pretty much how you finish a corner. The most common is with a 3-4 point. Remember, the fourth line wants to go down to the third line. So one space away, down to the third line. This is a corner enclosure with a 3-4 point, also known as a shimari. This is a very strong shape and a very good way to get the corner, and it's like 10 points almost immediately, and it's very strong. So shimari is a very strong shape. An enclosure for white, or for a star point, is to play one fourth line, goes down to third line, so one space away down to the third line. But this is still invadable. This is a ko. This is a little complex, so I'm not going to explain that right now. Just know it's not completely sealed until you get one more move. And this is the shape for white to seal it. So for the star point, it takes 2 moves to seal the corner. So the star point isn't really meant to get to the corner so easily. It's meant to expand a little bit more quickly. So the star point has less territory locally, but more influence on the rest of the board. So star point's more about developing than enclosing, but you can enclose if you need to. So that's how you use the 3-4 and the 4-4 for enclosing wise. 3-3, there isn't really an enclosure because it already gets the corner. So there's not really an enclosure with the 3-3. And this is kind of important. Someone asked, what if my opponent doesn't follow the Joseki sequence? Since we only know like 2 Josekis at this level, maybe 2 or 3 Josekis at this level, we will find out how we'll play against that. But mostly we're going to focus on our defense and just staying strong. So if our opponent comes in, we're going to watch our cutting points and just push them to the edge. So as long as you have basics, then whenever something goes weird or in some way that you don't know, then you want to revert to your basics. Watch your cutting points, stay strong, surround your opponent, and push them to the edge. That's how you deal with weird stuff. But basically, it's just watch your cutting points and stay strong. And if you can, then you push them to the edge. Okay, so that's pretty much the basics of enclosures. The other thing that we have to learn is an approach. Okay, so we have enclosures, and we also have approach moves. And this will get into kind of our second Joseki variation. This is a little bit more difficult to show on the 13x13, but this is the next Joseki you're going to learn. When black approaches white, white goes and plays on this side to start getting some space. This is ice space. This is starting to get our base. We'll learn more about bases on the 19x19, but if you want your group to not die, it needs space. You need to surround some space. So if you're all by your lonesome, get some space. We'll talk more about bases on the 19x19. All right, so the next variation is black slides under to steal some base, or to steal some space, while also making space. Okay, and white blocks with a 3-3. You cannot block directly, because then you get trapped along the edge, like so. And there's nowhere to go. Okay, so, or black can just fix his cutting point, and it's just a broken position. So that's why you don't block this one. You play here. Okay, then black actually goes back and one stone jumps 2. Again, we'll elaborate more on that phrase on the 19x19, but this is the next Joseki that you're going to learn. So on this board, probably what we'll do after this is jump up, or maybe just seal. Those are 2 simple moves that I think are very effective. This one might just be easier to use. It's not the most ideal move, but we don't need ideal moves. We need effective moves that we can use at our level. And I want to stress this. Play at your level. Okay? Play at your level. Don't play shapes and patterns and new variations that you just aren't prepared for yet. You need to learn things in the right order. Then those later things will make more sense. So we can't really talk about josekis if we don't understand cutting points. All right, so these are the basic variations that we're going to try to remember when we play 13 by 13. So let's go ahead and send the challenge and try to play our first 13 by 13 game. So this is going to be Clossi Approach. It's going to be 13 by 13. Color will be random. We'll do 5 minutes. And we're still doing Chinese rules because we're still not on the 1919. We're still beginners learning how variations inside our territory work. So it's still Chinese rules. There will be no handicap because I want to talk about the opening. And yep, and I think that'll be it. So we're going to send the challenge.
Game started.
Ooh, sorry about that noise. I forgot about that. All right, so he is black, so I am white. So we're going to do our same basics: open corners, open sides, and then just push the borders. And if we can, we might actually talk a little bit about the center if that comes up. All right, so we're going to do open corners. So we're going to play star point, so we have that. And I might play... Sometimes it's nice to play star point and a 3-4 point, so you can kind of learn the ins and outs of both. These are the two most common. You can also try 3-3, but changing it up can also give you chances to learn different shapes and different patterns and how they work together. Or if you want, you can just do 2 star points, learn how they work together, 2 3-4 points, learn how they work together, and all that stuff. All right, so now we have open corners, and he hasn't approached us because the approach would be from one space away, so we don't have to respond unless they approach us. But if he approaches from this side, I'm half tempted to respond over here because it's not one space away, but it is 2 spaces away. So I kind of want to respond and get some space, but let's think about this for a second. Open corners, done. Open sides. There's an open side here, there's an open side here, and an open side here, and a 3-3 here. This 3-3 does have a stone, so it'll be a little different. So maybe that's not our first go-to. I'd rather go to this one. But those are kind of our options. So the right side is actually the widest, and it's just almost an approach. So I feel fine to actually just play a shimari here and just play an enclosure. It feels very simple to just play this one. Very simple, very basic. Now we just wait our opponent. Okay, so we play an enclosure. So now we have one more open side. So I'm just going to go in, and a good way to go in, so this will be our first kind of invasions. Invasions for beginners is going to be the 3-3 point or approach a 4th line stone. So I'm just going to approach a 4th line stone. And then while we're on our opponent's side, the way to get out is going to be just to run away with 1-point jumps to not get surrounded, or to dive into the corner and make some space in the corner. Well, we're going to play many games of the 13 by 13, so we'll talk more about these and get more examples. But that's kind of the goal, is we go inside our opponent's area, and then we're not going to leave the stone alone until we're alive and okay, and we're safe. And we're going to talk about how we make these judgment calls as we get more and more examples. All right, so he's trying to surround me. So the first thing I want to do is, can I run away? Okay, so that's the first thing. Because there's no space for a base, which we'll talk about more on the 19x19, but the first thing you would do is check for a base, but there's just not enough room. So first thing for us is just going to be run away. Okay, so he kind of blocked us. So now I'm going to turn and start surrounding some side. Okay, so I'm going to turn and take some liberties so he can't just keep pushing me to the edge. Because one thing I don't want to do is just walk to the edge. Walking to the edge will have no space surrounded. And to survive with an invasion, you have to make space. This is a little bit higher level than what we've been talking about, but it's pretty much the same stuff. It's just adding on to what we've done. We have cutting points, we have liberties, we have pushing and blocking. Now we're learning how invasions work and how space works. So again, I'm going to do another space move. So if you recall, our joseki shape to the star point was this little slide, this little knights move slide, and that's knights move 1, 2, and then 1. So this slide under a 4th line stone is actually really nice for making space. So you go on the 3rd line as much as you can, and then you start sliding. So you go here. Now we just talked about this. So this is an immediate thing. Is if we remember our variation that we just talked about, I can play right here. But there is one, I'm actually glad this came up. There is one downside to this. Because, yes, we can kill this stone or break into this corner, depending on how he plays. So, yes, we can play this, but there is a variation where he gives us the corner to get the outside. And we'll try to talk about that in the review if we have time. So here I have to make a decision. Do I want to trap this stone against the edge and get some space in the corner? Or do I just want to walk up and expand my space on the side? And that's something that's a decision. That's something to think about. So let's see. What basic should I apply here? Probably I want to just stay connected, right? So let's just start with this one. We can it's hard to make a judgment call. When in doubt with a judgment call, let's just stick to the stuff we know. Let's stick to the familiar. See, I'm going to go here. And threaten to go into the corner. And I expect him to block, and then I'm going to expand my space even more. That's all I'm going to be doing, is expanding my space as much as I can. Okay, so he didn't block. So now he's actually threatening my 1-point jump. So now I need to check my cut. So 9x9 reading, okay? So imagine black pushes, I block, there's a cutting point right here. Black cuts, 1, 2 liberties, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and I play to get 1, 2, 3 and push him to the edge. He has 1, so he walks, and I'm doing this kind of fast, but this is kind of, take your time. So I have another minute and a half here. If you need to, take your time and read this out. Push, block, cut. Okay, 2 liberties, the 2 liberties. This one has 3, so we're not worried about it. So I need to play first. And push on the weak side and push black towards the edge. And it looks like I'm okay. So this cut doesn't work. And this is something we learned on the 9x9. So that's, if you struggle with these, then maybe play some more 9x9 for practice. But this one, I think I'm good. So I'm just going to walk into the corner and get some space in the corner. Okay, and that's how I'm going to survive with these stones. Okay, and I'm just going to push this to the edge. I could also block right here and just keep it dead. But this is probably more likely this level. Is that they would just immediately try to Atari. But blocking does the same thing, just block the whole area. And all I'm doing is making space for some for some life. And we'll talk more about life and death as we go. I also have a beginner's life and death series. So if you guys are interested in more expansion on the life and death, you can check that. So this one, I don't have to play this yet because I have 3 liberties, 4 liberties, and he has 1 liberty. The cutting point is not affected. He did take a liberty, so I got to recheck the cutting point. Doot. Okay, I Atari, 1, 2, 3 liberties, so I'm still good. I still have 3 liberties. Even though he took a liberty, I guess I gained liberties. So I still have 3 liberties, so I'm still good against this stone. So I have no cutting points, no problem. So now I can go back to my basics. Do open corners? No. Open sides? No. So now we kind of get into largest frameworks a little bit. This is actually a little bit tricky, but sorry, overtime. Let me turn the volume down a little bit. This is actually a little bit tricky, but it's basically who has the bigger position. In this case, it looks like black and white both look about equal, and since I'm in blacks and black is not in mine, I should be slightly bigger. But when it's equal like this, you normally want to push while building.
10,
so
9,
a good way to do this is shoulder
7,
hits, where you play
6,
a diagonal away from
5,
a single stone.
4.
So shoulder hits are great ways to do this. You build yours up and push theirs down, and you do it with a diagonal to 1 stone on the outside, and outside means closer to the center. So this one would be inside because it's closer to the edge. So it's inside that you can get surrounded. Outside, it's hard to surround. This one confuses me a little bit, but let's not panic. So he touched my stone, so I'm probably going to respond. So I could back off and connect, but I think I'm just going to push through because he's not connected, and I'm feeling pretty strong here. I have so much support, and I don't really have a lot of time to think about this. If you backed off, that's also okay. I don't really mind that. It's just staying strong. Okay, he took a liberty. Does you know, maybe this level you misread, it's fine. I didn't have to, but it's okay. We're in overtime. I expect mistakes to happen, but it's so in order to counteract those, it's better to be safe than sorry. Use your overtime and read as much as you can, but if it's uncertain, it's I think it's better to be safe than sorry at this level. Because taking unnecessary risk is going to lead to mistakes. So mistakes are okay. Like mistakes, overplaying a little bit or overcommitting, over defending a little bit is okay. We'll work on efficiency with game reviews and more practice and experience. So it's okay. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to over defend. And I just want to say that that's okay. It's okay to waste some moves if you have to.
7.
This one, I'm just going to stay connected and walk through this stone. Walking through the center like this, it's just good for me because see how black is just getting cut in Liberties? Oh, accept undo. It's nice to accept undos. It's okay. Not that big of a deal. So he's playing this. So now I'm starting to get... I'm watching this Knight's move, and I'm watching these cutting points. And again, a Knight's move is 1-2-1 or 1-1-2, like a Knight's move in chess. Knight's moves are cuttable, so you have to really watch these cutting points, the push and cut. Push and cut.
10,
we have to read that a
9,
lot.
8,
so I'm kind of like
7,
reading those a little
6.
quickly because I know them, but these are shapes that you're going to want to learn on this board. So I guess if you need to spend more time reading these out and gain more practice, and I can't stress enough how important practice is, and just more and more examples, more and more practice, more and more games. The more practice you have with these, the easier it'll be to read out if it's cuttable or not.
9,
but
8,
that's the things you're supposed
7,
to read.
6,
so this one,
5,
I'm okay. But let's say you over defend, it's okay. I'm talking a lot in overtime, so I'm not reading a lot because I'm talking. But let's assume that you misread. It's okay. Waste the move. Blah blah blah. But the things you are supposed to get down is cutting points from the Hanes, cutting points from the 1-point jumps, and now cutting points from the Knight's moves as well. These are the middle game shapes you want to get down, and these Liberties, all these touching moves. These are the shapes you have to get down on the small boards. Watching your cuts, watching your Liberties, staying safe, staying strong.
10,
and then when your opponent gives you openings
8,
like this,
7,
capture it or cut. Sometimes they give you openings, but your priority is learning your own shapes, watching your own cutting points, watching your own weaknesses. And then if you have the opportunity to attack your opponents, then that's good. But your priority is yours and learning your shapes. And that's what you're getting down on the small board. We'll talk more with more examples, hopefully, about building the largest framework. But the touching stuff is the biggest, most important thing from small boards. Is touching moves. So we're going to play our Joseki. I'm just going to block on this side because I'd rather have the wall facing my area that I control rather than facing my opponent's. That's why I picked this side instead of this side. All right, we're going to play our move. And then we're going to just play here. Here, I'm going to bump my own head. I usually don't like bumping my head like this. So I'm actually just going to play a 1-point jump or just fix my cut directly. So the reason you play this is to actually fix this cut. If you find yourself bumping your head or losing Liberties or something, then you can just fix it
10,
this way.
9,
so I'm going to fix it this way because it's just a little bit better. Because if my opponent cuts, you can see I Atari and he has nowhere to go. So this fixes the cut as well. I'm still watching my cut. Fixes the cut as well, but it doesn't bump my own head. If this stone wasn't here, then I would just go forward. Okay, so he fixed this cut. This one's unnecessary, though. Some 9x9 basics, you could have pushed it to the edge, but it's fine. So now open corners, open sides, no. Largest framework. There's this one little bit of center left. Mine should be the biggest, so I'm just going to keep expanding while reducing. So I'm going to Atari right here and expand my position while reducing. Shoulder hit, expand while reducing. Just keep making it bigger. And then once it gets just really small like this, then it's about time to start Endgame. And the Endgame is also called Yosei. Okay, this one, we're just going to ladder this. I don't know if I've talked about the ladder yet, but it's basically just a series of Ataris. So I'll show you. It goes down, and then I block on this side, and just runs. It's just a ladder to the wall. If you have not learned a ladder, I highly encourage you to look it up. Ladder is such a useful shape to know. So I really, really encourage you to look up what is a ladder and go. I'll try to talk about it in this video, but I don't know how much time we'll have because I have a lesson after this. But ladders are very important. Okay, he's trying to cut me, so I'm going to just fix my cut. I could have played this Hane and trapped him against the edge. I had the liberties to do it, but priorities are defense first. If you don't see it, it's okay. Okay. Do I have any problems? No. Does he have any problems? Yeah, there is a cutting point right here. But I'm more focused on mine because we don't have to cut every single cut. Just because we can doesn't mean we should. So let's think about this. Open corners, no. Open sides, no. Largest framework. Okay, so this is getting really small. So there's only just a little bit left. So that means we're at the end game. This comes with more of a gut feeling. We'll talk about more on the bigger board. So now we're going to start end game. So end game is actually quite fun and quite easy to get down if you can remember the good rule of thumbs. Second line sente first, then first line sente, then other sente. So sente means forcing. So I'm going to play a move on the second line that threatens to go in even further and force him to respond. But I didn't play a Hane right here because when he responds, I'll have a cutting point and I'll have to fix. That would be gote, which means I would lose the initiative. So I'm going to do second line sente. I'm going to play here, second line, force a response. And then after that, I'm going to do first line sente. Okay, so now I'm going to do first line sente. So I'm going to block here and threaten this cutting point. So if I can block the first line and sente or push the first line and sente and forcing my opponent to respond, it's good. So this one I can Hane because it'll leave a second line cut. So you'll see this in just a second. I expect black to block. I'm going to fix my Atari, and then he's going to fix his cut, and I will have the first move. So this is going to be first line sente, and that's how you do endgame. You do all the sente that you can, and then after that you start blocking big things. Okay, so the next sente is going to be... there's no more second or first line. This one's not sente, because if I play, he plays, and then I take, he doesn't have any cutting points or anything, so this one's gote. So now I'm going to try sente move. So I'm going to push other borders in sente. So I'm going to try to push other borders in sente. Just going to push other borders in sente, and this one threatens an Atari, so I'm going to push it in sente. Okay, and now I'm going to push this one in sente. This does activate a cut if he's not careful. And there is a cool cut here. So there's actually a lot of cutting points here. So he fixed the cut. This one, he Ataris and I'm trapped. But there is a cut right here. Atari and then Atari. So I can get these three. But it's fine. We don't have to see that. If we don't see it, it's fine. If for an exercise, try reading that on your own. But I'm just going to push this in sente to get like another point or two right here in sente by threatening this double Atari. Because maybe if you don't see it, it's okay. You don't have to play perfect. Just play decent, right? Just play okay. So I'm out of sente moves, so now I'm going to play a big gote move. And this is a big gote move. And you don't have to count it perfectly, or you don't have to know exactly what's the biggest. As long as you get value for your gote move, I think it's okay. And now it's black's turn. And black has the initiative now. So once you run out of sente, so this is self-Atari, so I'm just going to take. And so the end game is just all about that initiative. So he played, so I'm going to fix. And he's going to fix. Second line cuts. We remember that from 9x9. Okay, so now I have the initiative again. I don't think I have any big forcing moves. So I'm just going to play a move with value. So maybe just here. And just get a couple more points. I could also go like right here. Just, value. Just get value. Just get something. Or take something. Just get value. Okay, if he does this, I'm just going to trap him. We can read cutting points at this level. Yeah, I hope you're watching your cutting points. Don't forget your 9x9 basics. Cutting points are the 9x9 basics. We always read the cuts. Always check the cuts. So here, I'm not talking about it as much because I'm taking it for granted that you guys are also reading them. I'm not missing my cutting points, but this is something that I want you to have down, is watch those cutting points. Make it second nature to where you barely have to spend a thought on it. You read it, you know it, it's good. So this one, I already knew that I just push it down, it's trapped. But it's not that I'm not reading them, it's that I'm just doing it more quickly and I'm just not talking about it. But this is stuff that I'm still keeping in mind, still watching, that I want you to have down from the 9x9. Okay, this one is just going to be, it almost looks like a ladder, but I guess it's not quite. So maybe you think it's a ladder, okay? So maybe you do that. Let's play out the ladder, because maybe you think it's a ladder. It's like, okay, doot. And now you should notice that there's liberties, right? So if he goes and you Atari, and he goes, you'll only have one liberty. So you gotta watch your liberties and ladders. Okay, so in this case, I do have a stone that I can just capture right here. But if I didn't, I'm just gonna take that. If I didn't, then I wouldn't be able to Atari right here, and I'd have to crawl along the edge to save my stones. Because defense is more important than forcing something that doesn't work. Okay, you have to accept it. If something doesn't work, you have to accept that and just play the best that you can from there. So if this stone wasn't dead and I was trapped against the edge, then I would have to accept it and just crawl and to save my stones. So he passed. So I want to encourage you to fill Dame. So I'm going to let him know I'm going to fill Dame. So Dame are these neutral points. I want to encourage you to fill these
10.
Because sometimes there is a point hidden that you don't know about. So right here, actually black had a point, because if black plays right here and right here, these two stones would have been an Atari. So by playing this Dame, I gained a point. In Chinese rules, Dame is also value, but you're going to learn Japanese rules later where Dame will be neutral. But it is important to understand how cutting points work with Dame. This is very, very important, because in person, you fill Dame, and you have to watch. Sometimes filling Dame activates cutting points, and you're going to lose games because of it, but you have to gain that experience to understand what Dame affects cuts and what Dame doesn't. So Dame is very, very important for you to gain practice, and sometimes you will make mistakes. Sometimes you'll self-Atari and lose groups. Sometimes you'll mess up cutting points. But you need that experience in order to understand what Dame is worth a point and what Dame isn't. So he passed, so I'm going to pass because I'm confident that I can capture those. So we do the stone removal phase, click the stones, it does it automatically, and then we're going to accept the score.
You have won.
All right, and we say thank you for the game. All right, so now I'm going to review this game.
Review started.
And unfortunately, I only have another 10 to 12 minutes for this video, so I'm going to have to rush through this review. But don't worry, I will be giving more examples and more reviews for this series, for the 13x13. So don't worry, it's not just one video, it's not just one game. It's going to be many videos, many games, many examples. Okay, and yeah, thank you, Squalm, for playing. Thank you for being our test opponent. All right, so open corners, shimari. Then I approached, and remember I tried to escape, and then I expanded my space. And so here I could have played this, but the sequence I wanted to show you was, even though I can take the corner, my opponent can cut the outside. So you have to be wary of that and know that that is while it is a powerful shape to steal the corner, it can also be a wrong shape depending on how the outside looks. So just know that you have that option. So in this case, I just chose to stay strong. I did watch my cutting point. If black cuts, then I just push it to the edge. These are my 9x9 basics. So I just walked in and expanded my eye space. Okay, and here, I could have also blocked here because the stone's still trapped. So it didn't matter as long as I, blocked my space. And then here, I said I had enough space. This is from my life and death training. I forget if I forget if I talked about this on 9x9, but life and death is just about making enough space to have 2 eyes. If you guys would like me to make a quick video about that, let me know in the comments on Twitch or down below in the YouTube comments. But I also have an entire life and death series for beginners, so I just encourage you to watch that because life and death is something I have already taught. But if you guys want me to expand on it again in this Clossi Approach series, I'm happy to do so. I'm just trying to avoid teaching multiple things, but life and death is important. The gist of it is have enough space for 2 eyes. So I have an eye right here and enough space over here for another eye. So I'm alive, so I can go play elsewhere. So here I did largest framework because there's no open sides. An open side is a side that doesn't have an approach and doesn't have an approach like here or here and doesn't have an enclosure. That is my definition for open side. No enclosures, no approaches. Just empty. And no invasions or anything either. Just an empty side. So there's no empty side. I did play an enclosure. So we're at largest framework. And shoulder hits are kind of our first shape to build the center. So I said ours was a little bit bigger. So if we draw a line from like the edge of the framework, this is also known as the line of influence. So I just draw a line. There's the line of influence. And here you have to take away this for black. So even though he's out on the middle of the board and I'm not, he doesn't have as much edge. So you can say he has like 1 or 2 lines. I have 1, 2, 3 lines. So mine is a little bit bigger. If your opponent's is bigger, then you want to go deal with theirs. If yours is bigger, you just want to make yours bigger, right? So you want to play in the biggest framework. In this case, I played on it in a way that made mine bigger and also made his smaller. And I did that with a shoulder hit. It's also 1 space away, which is really nice and solid. So shoulder hit, again, is a diagonal for the stone on the center side, not the underside. This is, we like to call this, like in chat and stuff, among friends and stuff, we like to call this the armpit hit. If the outside or closer to the center is the shoulder, then the inside is the armpit, because that's the one you can get surrounded, you can block against the edge, so you want to be closer to the center. So that's a shoulder hit. And that's a good way to build up an area. I could have also played this one. This one's a little 2 spaces away, so it's a little bit more difficult to use, but still also very possible. Just a little bit more complex. Another way to build, if your area is the bigger one, another way to build is a 1-point jump. That is a great way to move your position upwards. And then when you're doing it, you don't want to play a 1-point jump and another 1-point jump on the same side. You kind of want to go 1-point jump here, 1-point jump here, 1-point jump here, 1-point jump here, and you want to build up a bowl kind of idea. You want to build up the sides of a bowl. You don't want like this, because this side is very easy for black to come in and destroy the points. So in order to hold area or territory, or you can think of it like holding water, you need to have both edges. So if you go on one edge, then you want to go to the other. So once I got here and responded, then later on I went and played on this side. Now, unfortunately, there was a lot of fighting up here, so I didn't really get to show you a good example of that. But fighting is more important than building up the framework. The touching stuff is much more important. So that's what I tried here. Another reduction idea that we didn't get to talk about this game is a capping move. So if you want to play somewhere on that line, sometimes a capping move, which is playing 1 space above, towards it closer to the center, 1 space above a stone. A capping move is another great way to reduce, and caps can actually be used in other ways as well, but our first way is going to be to reduce. So capping moves, shoulder hits, really great for reducing. Shoulder hits and 1-point jumps, really great for building. Shoulder hits are kind of like, you kind of can do both. So can capping moves in some situations. Just kind of like play the board and pick the right one for the job. But 1-point jumps, capping moves, shoulder hits, these are kind of large framework shapes that you want to work with. And then so when he touched, now we go back into other stuff, attack and offense. So cutting points, staying connected, watch our shapes. So this is a nice move. So I could have very easily backed off, and that would have also been fine. But one thing we want to learn on the 13 by 13 is this knight's move cuttable? So the way you check that is you push on the 2 points and check the cuts. So the way I check that is if he pushes here, I block, and he cuts, does either this A or B get captured? Okay. In this case, A can't be captured, so I can't capture that cutting stone, but I can capture B. Okay, so that cutting point was okay. What about this one? Okay, so check the cutting stones. Can I capture either one of them? It looks like A, I can push down to the edge, so it looks pretty nice. And B, I can push down to the edge. And 2 liberties to 4 liberties, so it's pretty okay. These are the kind of variations that you want to start learning how to read on the 13 by 13. So remember, 9 by 9, we talked about how it's not about us not reading. It's about us reading only the stuff that we understand. We just read very specific things. And what we read was the cutting points. Pushing to the edge, the second line cut, and that was pretty much it. Cutting points of Hanes, cutting points that we get on the second line and third line. Just, basic cutting points. We're going to expand on that. And we're going to add a little bit more difficult reading, which is cutting points of Hanes, cutting points of Knight's moves. And we're going to learn the ins and outs of those on the 13 by 13. Before moving to the 19 by 19, we need to have our first couple Josekis down, so like the 3-3 invasion and our approach moves. We need to have those down to where we can play and survive and be okay. We need to be able to invade our opponent's side and make space to make life. We need to understand which ones work, which ones don't. We need to learn Knight's moves and Hanes. And we also need to understand life and death, which I don't know if I'll talk about in this series specifically because I have a whole playlist for life and death. But that's the stuff you need to understand on the 13 by 13. Once you get that down, you feel comfortable with that stuff, then we can go to 19 by 19 and learn even more shapes and patterns. But again, this is the Clossi approach. We just learn just a few shapes and a few patterns at a time while not forgetting the patterns and shapes we already know. We just add to it and just get more and more layers get stronger. So, yeah. So someone said, imagine being comfortable with life and death. So I think what they mean is life and death gets really complex. The idea of life and death isn't that you're good at life and death. It's that you understand 2 eyes versus no eyes. Okay, you don't have to be able to read it perfectly. Just as long as you understand how life and death works. That's kind of what's important. You understand that with my invasion, I was getting space until I had 2 eyes. As long as I understood that concept, then that was good. That's all I really need. Life and death will get more and more difficult as you progress. But that's basically what it is. So let's see. Is there any other important things? Just touching fights, stay connected, stay strong, and if your opponent gives you a chance, you can take it. Just your priorities are your defense. We played the Joseki here. We bumped our own head. So the reason this one is, I guess I didn't talk about this very well, but the reason this cutting point is okay is because we have what's called a net shape. And this is another thing that I encourage you to look up and maybe do some net problems. But we have this net shape right here where we trap our opponent. And this is kind of like a fishing net to catch the fish. You see you can't escape this way and you can't escape this way. Okay, but this is only true because this is 2 liberties and this is 3 liberties. But let's compare it to when I bump my head. If I bump my head and then leave, this is not a net because you can see I only have 1 liberty. And even if he didn't push, this cutting point is not a net because I Atari, because I bumped my own head. I don't have that liberty. So bumping your own head is a little dangerous because of the cutting point. So just watch out for that. That's why I played a 1-point jump. That way, I'm still watching my cutting points. Cutting points are the fundamentals of attack and defense. That's what we have to have down before we move on to 19 by 19. It's our cutting points. So watch the cutting points. If something affects the liberties, see if that affects the cutting points. And that's how you can learn that stuff. Let's see. Anything else I want to point out in this video? Just So this is a ladder. So let me show you the ladder really quick. And ladder is a series of Ataris. That's what it is. All right, so unfortunately, I am out of time today, so I won't be able to do too much more. We'll talk more about Yosei and more examples and stuff with more videos. But again, this is just the first video. This isn't all. This isn't everything. This isn't all the examples. We're gonna have many examples of 13 by 13. So this is just your first look at the 13 by 13. And again, I want to reiterate: practice, 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 practice. I can't make you be able to see stuff and read stuff. I can just tell you what you're trying to work towards, and then you have to practice and get there. So yeah, that's basically our first Clossi approach to the 13 by 13. And I'm gonna go ahead and make this like 23Q. So this is the first Clossi approach to 23Q. So yeah, hopefully you found this helpful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.